Today, we are going to visit 3 cities, so I have to sort of apologize up front if we overrun a little bit, because thus far we've been going to sort of 2 cities in each talk, and if you do feel like you're in a rush, when we hit the stroke of 3, you need to go, just go, but I may have to continue. And I want to thank everybody who's been here for more than one talk. I mean, I really appreciate seeing people that faces who are that are familiar today. Okay, so just a quick recap of where we've gone. So in the course of the last 4 weeks, we've gone to Portuguese Malacca and the Spanish Philippines. We've made a stopover in Batavia in the Netherlands, East Indies. We've gone to sort of explore the Siamese Empire. Last week we were in French Indochina, and today, the very last talk, we're going to be visiting the British Empire in the Far East. Specifically to British Burma and the Strait settlements, and the 3 major cities, port cities of Rangoon, Yangon today, Penang, and Singapore. So Rangoon and all of Lower Burma were actually taken by the British in 1852, rather late in the game. So Rangoon as a city is actually newer than either Penang or Singapore. But we go there first because if you were on a ship going this way, that's where you must start off. In 1886, when the British took over all of Burma, Rangoon became the capital of British Burma, and which was administered actually as the British Raj, as part of the British Raj, British India. Yeah. And it was once a sleepy fishing settlement on the banks of the Rangoon River, and the British transformed it into a hub for international trade and commerce. A story, of course, we've heard before with Singapore. So being the commercial and the political capital meant that Rangoon received actually a significant amount of investment into its urban planning, into its infrastructure, into its public services. And it became a kind of showpiece city of British imperial might and modernity at the time. With its grid-like urban plans, with its broad tree-lined boulevards, and also with all the monumental civic and commercial buildings. Way bigger than the ones you would find here in Singapore. And I think even if you go to Yangon today, you'd be struck by how much of this sort of monumentality of the city still actually stands. Okay, so let's dive in. So this is a map of the city from 1924. This is from George Orwell's time, because we all know he was in Burma from 1924 to around 1927. I think my dates may be slightly wrong, but and I mentioned again that Burma and Rangoon were administered as part of the British Raj. So in terms of the urban planning and layout of the city, it most resembles the other major Indian port cities, Kolkata and Madras, which is today's Chennai. In what way does it do so? Okay, so I mentioned it's set in the Rangoon River. This is where the port is. And the city was divided into sort of the downtown area, as well as the cantonment. This is something that's very specific to the cities of the British Raj, that there was a cantonment that was military in nature, as well as suburban. There is a Strand Road in Rangoon, which is echoed in the Strand Road in Kolkata. And this was sort of the center of the sort of civic and commercial area of the town. And at least for the Burmese, at least, the center, in the heart of the city, is the Yangon Pagoda, which has stood there, supposedly, so legend says, for more than 2,000 years. So let's zoom into the city proper. In typical sort of British colonial fashion, and like all other British colonial cities in India, the city was segregated. So at the heart of the city was the Sula Pagoda. There's an axis that ran through the city, and to the right was the so-called White Town, which is the European or the British town. To the left, was the non-European immigrant town. And you will see this also broadly replicated in Penang and in Singapore later on. And by non-European, we're referring to the Chinese, the Arabs, and the Indians, whether Hindu or Muslim, because the Burmese they lived sort of outside of the city center largely. So what? Let's just focus first on the European towns. And what were sort of the key areas and monuments in this part of the city? There was Strand Road and Fair Road. I mentioned these were where you found the government and civic buildings of the day. Along Strand Road, which ran by the waterfront, and Fair Road, which goes perpendicular to Strand Road. And then along Dalhousie Road, Merchant Road, and Bank Road, these were the commercial thoroughfares where you found sort of the bank headquarters, the headquarters of the trading companies, as well as like the departmental stores of the day. One of the major monuments in the city is the High Court, and we'll see it later. The public offices or secretariat. In every sort of city of the British Raj, there was always a secretariat, which was where sort of the main offices of the colonial government were. Religion, definitely important in a colonial city. And there was the Roman Catholic cathedral here, the Anglican cathedral here. Right beside it is the market. Sort of a market for sort of everyday goods, and from the market, I think we will sort of wander back down to the heart of the city where we pay a visit to the town hall, and we come back here again because then we're going to cross over. So let's just dive into some of the specific sites. First, Strand Road. So Strand Road sits, like I said, on the waterfront in Rangoon. It is or was the most important street in Rangoon. It still is. It's sort of the equivalent to the Shanghai Bund because it sits on the waterfront, and there are all the most monumental buildings in the city sort of sit on this street. In the day, of course, and this was in the 1800s, it looks, it was a rather quiet, sort of somnolent, dusty street with sort of horse carriages and sepoys. Here's another view of it. But today, it's actually a traffic clogged thoroughfare. It's fiendishly difficult to take any photos on the street at all, or to cross the street to sort of look at any of the buildings close up. This is actually the British Embassy today, though before it used to be the offices of a British merchant house, J and F Graham and Company. Okay, so let's kind of explore some of the monuments on the street. Right beside this is arguably the most important, the most famous building on Strand Road. It is the legendary Strand Hotel, which was the city's grand colonial hotel. And here it is in the 1900s. It was taken by a photographer that was active in Rangoon at the time, Pete Clear. And this is from the collection of the British Library. So in the day, when you got off from your cruise liner, which would have come from Calcutta to Rangoon, you would have gone off at the port, and you're sort of there, and then you would sort of trundle in a carriage here to short ride away to the Strand Hotel. And which, as you see in this advert from the 1910s, was entirely under European management. That was one of the key things at the time, to claim that your hotel was under European management. Of course, the management was Armenian, and you would recognize the two gentlemen here. They were two of the four Sarkis brothers, and they are Armenians who originate from the town of New Hulfa in Isfahan, which is in today's Iran, and they came to Southeast Asia by way of Calcutta. So the Strand Hotel was actually the youngest and the third of a trio, and a little more, of hotels that were very famous in Southeast Asia. I mean, we know of these, the Eastern Oriental Hotel in Penang, as well as the Raffles Hotel in Singapore. And it was also the shortest lived because it was only in the Sarkis brothers' hands for 24 years. And then it was sold to another Armenian proprietor. It still remains, however, more or less immaculately restored, and it is still the best place to experience the nostalgia of British Burma today in Myanmar. So let's leave our bags in our rooms and step out into the city. Just down the street from the Strand Hotel, I think you find some of the most stupendously monumental buildings in Myanmar, quite surreal actually. This is one of them. This is the Port Trust Commission. It was built in the 1920s in a kind of Anglo-Saracen style. So there's the form is sort of European, but you can see there's a kind of Spanish, Moorish archers, as well as like Another building just across the street, the Accountant General's office. It was built in 1912 in an Italian style. Just down the road, the Customs House. It looks like you're in London here. I mean, it's built in 1915 in kind of classic Edwardian style. The new Law Court buildings, built in 1927. You see a little bit. You can see a little bit of the mixing coming in already, where the form is sort of English, but the roofs just slightly start to take on a bit more of Burmese characteristics. Down the road, the Bengal, the Bank of Bengal, built in 1914 in a neoclassical style. And just beside it was this fantastic building. Yeah, it's gone now. This was the General Post Office of Rangoon, and it was built in 1900 in a sort of high Victorian style, very, very ornate. Unfortunately, it was destroyed by an earthquake in the 1930s, and then replaced by sort of nondescript building. So that's the end of Strand Road. Just behind Strand Road are the two roads, Bank Road and Merchant Road, and these I mentioned are where you find most of the commercial, financial headquarters in the city. So this stands on the corner of Fair Road and Bank Road. This is the headquarters of the former Chartered Bank, which is the forerunner of today's Standard Chartered Bank. So this is built in this is built in Art Deco style in 1942. Nearby, another sort of Art Deco bank, the Reserve Bank of India. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens of these buildings all over. I mean, I think it's wonderful to just have a quick to have a wander around this part of the town, because most of the architecture like this still remains in the city today. It's the Safar building from the 1900s, Rander House. There's all these wonderfully evocative names from the time. These would have been sort of commercial headquarters of commercial trading companies, Escott & Co., the Oriental Life Assurance, an insurance company. And here also was where you would find the sort of the departmental stores, the cafes, and the places to get your clothes and cars and so on. And this series of advertising from the 1910s just provides a sense of what was actually there. On Merchant Street, for example, you could go to these cafes and breakfast and tiffin, or you could have, Viennese patisseries. Viennese patisseries, for some reason, were very popular at the time. In all of the port cities we've been in, there's always been sort of a cafe for Viennese patisseries. You could go to the automobile showroom to buy your car. So it was all very sort of modern and fashionable. Department stores and boutiques where you can get sort of the latest fashions. Supposedly, the correct kind of wearing apparel for Eastern traveling, though I feel to see how this is correct for the climate at the time. And then these are sort of the two biggest departmental stores. White Wayne Law and Company, and they were present in all of the major British colonial port cities, even in Singapore. So the offices of White Wayne Law and Company used to stand by the Fullerton building. The other famous department store is Rowe and Co. And they were well known for having the most modern American goods in Burma. And this is Rowe and Co. Today, more or less. It's been restored, so it now looks entirely sort of white and whitewashed. But this it was sort of built in 1911 in kind of Edwardian style. And across the street actually stands, to my mind, the most important building in Rangoon, and this is the High Court. Here it is today. You can't quite see it, it's sort of obscured by the trees, but it stands for quite a bit. And it was built in 1914 in a sort of a classic Edwardian style, and it recalls, if you've been to Kolkata, the Writers' Building in Kolkata. Another building that was sort of erected at the same time period was the Secretariat Building. This is where the government offices were. Unfortunately, I presented this photo. There are nicer photos because that's how it is today. I mean, it's all fenced up. You can't really go in, and it's sort of crumbling and neglected. And this building is also significant because it was here, it was infamous actually, that General Aung San, who is the father of Aung San Suu Kyi, was actually assassinated on the eve of a couple months before Burma gained its independence from Great Britain. Okay, north of the Secretariat, the Roman Catholic Cathedral. These two images are 100 years apart, and pretty much looks the same. The Anglican Cathedral in a sort of Anglo-Saracen style, and it sits beside the city's main market, Scots Market, built in 1926, a kind of Art Deco style. Today it's the famous Beaujour Market, where you go to get everything you can possibly imagine in Yangon. And then from there we kind of mosey on down back to the heart of the city, and the dividing line, which is the Sula Pagoda. And here it's a good place to sort of get a panorama of the city skyline at the time, which is still the city skyline today. The High Court building, the Port Trust, customs, and what is most interesting is Town Hall, which is the city hall today. It was constructed in 1936, and by that, actually constructed in 1936 by and designed by a Burmese architect. So, as you know, also from our talk last week in Saigon and Hanoi, 1930s, around the time that architects started to experiment a little bit more with local styles. And so you see here, the form of the building is more or less European, but the roofs are Burmese. And this is today's City Hall, which still stands. Okay, so from the Sula Pagoda, which again is supposedly more than 2,000 years old, although the structures here probably are more than 100 years old at most. Once we cross Sula Pagoda, we leave the sort of non-European part of the old town, and we go into the immigrant quarters. Let me see if yeah. And to me, the best way to explore an immigrant quarter, and this is what I did, was to sort of go up and down the streets, just up and down and up and down and up and down, just to witness sort of the lives that are led in this area, as well as the many surprising places of worship. I mean, what is surprising, I think, for people who have not been to Yangon before, is to realize how multicultural it is. So in that same area, you'll find Chinese temples and Hindu temples, a whole bunch of them, Shia mosques, Sunni mosques, Jain temples, even a synagogue, and a whole bunch of other places of worship. You'll also find, I was surprised because I also found roti prata on the streets, and variations of chicken rice as well. What else you will find here is this sort of amazing array of vernacular commercial architecture of different styles, all of which are still standing. So you have sort of the cast iron style building, Art Deco. This is the sort of main market, the Tengi market in the immigrant town of Rangoon at the time. It was still very, very bustling today. Even shop houses, like the ones you find in Singapore, because of the Chinese community. So everywhere the Chinese have gone, you find these sort of Nanyang style shop houses. And these sort of residential apartments from the early 1900s. Okay, so moving away from the town center, we'll now pay a quick visit to the cantonment and suburbs. This is where we find the city's two major clubs. We'll pay a quick stop at the lakes, and of course visit the Sri Pagoda. So the cantonment is where the colonial civil servant and the military would have resided at the time in their barracks and in their colonial bungalows. And here we call these colonial bungalows black and white, but in Burma they were known for their green shuttered windows and whitewashed facades. And these photos are taken again by this photographer, P. Clear, who was active in Burma at the time, at the turn of the 18th century. Here you find at the center of the social scene. This was the old Pegu Club, built in 1882 in a sort of Victorian, slightly Victorian style with some Burmese influence in it. And this was the gentleman's club, where you went to get your gin sling, and you went to sort of have deep conversations with your gentleman mates. And this is also famous for having hosted Rudyard Kipling. He supposedly wrote part of his poem Mandalay here when he visited. Today it stands derelict and neglected, so there's no point in showing. The other important club was the Gym Partner, which was, I guess, a fancy name for the cricket club. And this was more of a sporting club where gentlemen went to play cricket and polo and what else. And again, you know sort of the slightly the Burmese influence in the architecture. No tour, of course, is complete without the Yangon pagoda, which has been a major pilgrimage site for the Burmese since the 1500s. And in the 1920s, the early 1900s as well, the Europeans too sort of flocked to this site to visit. And the key thing to observe really is that these are more than 100 years apart, these two images, and the views still look more or less the same. I mean, arriving at Sri Lankan Pagoda is as awe-inspiring as it was 100 years ago. This is the entrance 100 years ago, and today, more or less, still looks like this. You can still see it's here. And this is the view inside with the stupa, a large stupa here, and this is the view today. Again, it's still, I mean, it hasn't changed. It's been more than 100 years. Nearby is Dapuzi Park. So after our tour of the city, we took a break and take a stroll in Dapuzi Park, which sits on the banks of the Royal Lake, today's Kandaugi Lake. This was a large artificial lake. We call them reservoirs here. It's a large artificial lake actually to supply water to the city. But it was also a place of, for relaxation because you had wonderful views from here of the greenery and of the Sri Lankan Pagoda. So we sort of sit and contemplate the pagoda for a couple minutes before we leave the city and move on. Okay, from Rangoon, we board a ship. This is 1920s, of course, there are no airplanes then. Heading south for the island of Penang, which is one of the three cities of the Strait settlements in Peninsula Malaya. And Penang is actually the oldest colonial settlement in Southeast Asia, oldest British colonial settlement in Southeast Asia, having been established by the English East India Company in 1786. So it's actually far older than Rangoon and then Singapore. And this is the coat of arms of the English East India Company. You can see this red cross here, the cross of St. George, this is the flag of England. And the three lions as the sort of guardian lions of England. Here you can see the coat of arms of the United Kingdom, England, Scotland, and Wales. Sorry, it's very, very small. And the script here reads, Auspicio Regis et Senatus Angliae, which means by right of the King and the Senate of England. So the Honourable East India Company was established by royal charter by Queen Elizabeth I in 1600. That makes it a contemporary and most certainly the strongest competitor to the Dutch East India Company at the time, the VOC. And from its headquarters in London, which still stands today, it would establish a trade route for spices, cotton, liqueurs, and eventually opium that took in the major port cities of India, Southeast Asia, and China. And it was also the East India Company that eventually conquered all of India and placed it under the British Crown. So the EIC, the East India Company, came to Penang in the late 1700s with the intent of establishing a strategic midway point between China and India, specifically the port of Canton in South China and the cities of Madras and Calcutta in India. And Penang's position at the northernmost point of the Straits of Malacca, to which all ships have to pass, I mean we know this, to get between India and China, made it a rather strategic location. I mean, it seemed to be strategic at the time, but they would later find out that it was the position at the north of the Straits was actually a bit limiting for ships returning from China. And they would set their sights on another island. And we know which that island was, what that island was. But for the moment, they came and they established the city of Georgetown, which was the first British colonial settlement in Southeast Asia here, at the sort of tip of the easternmost peninsula of the island. This also was where the port is located. In the planning of the city again, they were influenced by British India, notably the cities of Madras and Calcutta. Because like the cities of Madras and Calcutta, and Bombay also, you will see that there is a walled fort, Fort Cornwallis, and which Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras, being older, also have, but their forts are actually way bigger and encompass the entire city. Now, the first three cities we visited on this trip, Malacca, Manila, and Batavia, were also walled cities, and their walls also sort of encompass the entire city. And because they were built in the 1500s and the 1600s during the medieval era. But by the 1700s, methods of warfare had developed to the point where walled cities, big walls around cities, were no longer irrelevant. But they built a small fort anyway, which turned out really to not be too very useful. And this explains, also as I said, this explains why the fort is so small. And later on in Singapore and Rangoon, they would do away with a wall fort altogether. So you don't see this fort appearing again in the 1800s. So this is sort of the turning point. Okay, like in British India and in Rangoon, the city of Georgetown was segregated. So to the north was White Town, but here we call it the Civic District. And there was a commercial district which was linked to the port to the east. And sort of off the coast you have again the immigrant districts, which were the Chinatown, of Little India of the city. And perhaps coincidentally, at the intersection of these sort of two axes, you would find the government offices of the city, and later on the Victoria Memorial, which was created to commemorate the passing of Queen Victoria in the early 1900s. So let's dive into the Civic District and look at the key pieces of the urban planning. The British built their ambition into the urban plans of Penang, and they would then replicate these urban plans on a much bigger scale in Singapore. So let's see what these actual specific pieces are. I mentioned the government offices in Victoria Memorial. There was Fort Cornwallis. There was the Padang, which was called the Esplanade in the colonial era. Around the Padang sat these monumental, the major monuments of the city, the town hall, the city hall. Flanking the Padang, you have the cricket club and the recreation club. Nearby, Supreme Court, the school, the Anglican Church, the Catholic Church, and a little further off you have the hotel, the Eastern Oriental Hotel. So let's visit each one in turn. Here you see a panorama from the intersection point of the colonial and commercial districts. You see the go-downs, the beach, Swettenham Pier, government offices here, Fort Cornwallis, and the Victoria Memorial. The Victoria Memorial, interestingly, was actually commissioned by a Chinese gentleman in the city, a Mr. Chia Chin Piao Esquire. The Chinese in the city, many of them, especially the wealthy ones, saw themselves as loyal British subjects. One in particular was very moved by the late Queen Victoria's passing, and so this was his response to that. Fort Cornwallis, as I mentioned, was built quite early on in the city. And the present structure here dates from 1804, and it still stands today. Just beside it is the Esplanade, or the Padang. Town Hall, City Hall still stand, but the cricket club, which used to stand here, was destroyed during World War II and torn down. So this is Town Hall in the 1900s, and here it is today. It recalls our own Victoria Memorial Hall. Part of the Victoria Memorial Concert Hall and Theatre today was also the Town Hall. the municipal offices, or City Hall, built in 1903. This was the cricket club in the 1900s, which was destroyed in World War II. Built in a sort of Tudor style. The Supreme Court, which still stands today, Palladian style 1903. The Penang Free School is the equivalent of a Raffles institution. In today's Penang State Museum. St. George's Church, which was the Anglican church of the city, was built in 1818 and is the oldest Anglican church in Southeast Asia. In 1880, this was built, the Church of the Assumption, the Catholic church of the city. You'll notice always there's the Anglican and the Catholic community. And the Eastern and Oriental Hotel, built in 1885 by the Sarkis brothers. And this was their very first hotel, the first one that they built. The Raffles and the Strand Hotel comes later. It is still it was restored recently, and it's still the place as the Strand Hotel to get a sense, a nostalgic sense of colonial Georgetown. And it played host to the likes of Rudyard Kipling, Charlie Chaplin, and other heads of states and nobility. And in particular, the lawn of the E&O, with its views of the Malacca Strait and one of the longest seafront walks in the city, was actually very famous with the was very popular with the colonial sect, who would come here in the evenings for light music, entertainment, string quartets, and so on. Today, of course, it's a swimming pool. But the view of the Straits of Malacca is still one of the most amazing views that we get in Penang. Okay, let's re-emerge from our hotel and then sort of take a quick carriage ride over to the commercial district, which is characterized by the Penang waterfront, or we can sort of, or the Penang Bund, so to speak, quote unquote, on which you find the General Post Office. And here also you find the other significant site, which is Beach Street. This was the commercial and the financial street and center of the city. And here it was that the city's banks and trading houses were located. Okay, so here's the Bund, I suppose, the waterfront in Penang. This is the first thing you would see when you came into dock. And there you see the GPO, the General Post Office. This is it, in the early 1900s. Interestingly, it's set on the waterfront, as well as this street, which is called Downing Street, like the Downing Street in London. The other interesting building you'll find on the waterfront in the Bund is this Federated Malay States Railways Jetty. And this is interesting because it was essentially the railway station, except no railways came here. You would have had to buy your ticket here and then take a ferry over to Butterworth to take your train onwards to the rest of Malaya. Behind the waterfront is Beach Street. This is a view of Beach Street just by the GPO towards the Victoria Memorial. To the left is the Chartered Bank of India, Australia, and China, built in the 1930s. And this is the exact same view, more or less, today. You can see that the Standard Chartered Bank still stands. GPO is out of focus. Just across from the Standard Chartered Bank was the other important bank building. Again, you find this bank and the Chartered Bank wherever there were British colonial, wherever the British established colonial cities in China, in India, and in Southeast Asia. So this was the bank in the 1900s, and this is it today. This building was built in 1948. Okay, so left of the commercial district were the sort of the Chinese and the Indian quarters. And the main street here is Pitt Street. It's called Jalan Kapitan Kennedy today. And this street is also promoted as the Street of Harmony. And some of the other streets, just to demonstrate just how multicultural it was and still is. China Street, Chulia Street. Chulia is what the British called Indian Muslims. Armenian Street and Achin Street. Achin refers to Aceh. And there was a community of Acehnese residing in Penang at the time. And I mentioned Pitt Street is known as the Street of Harmony because it is on this same street where it can be found different places of worship from the major world religions. Like I mentioned, St. George's Church, the Anglican Church, Chinese Goddess Mercy Temple, the Sri Mahamariamman Temple, and the Kapitan Kling Mosque, which was a Indian Muslim mosque, and this mosque gives the name to the street today. But around the area, I think what is most unique about this area is that you find many other communities too, and many other sort of important monuments of the various communities in Penang. The site Al-Khas mentioned today is Penang Islamic Museum, Armenian Street with the shop houses, the Armchair Mosque, which the Armchair community worshipped at, the Kukongsi Clan and Temple Complex, one of the most spectacular temple complexes outside China. The Puranicans were also here, and the Penang Peranakan Museum commemorates their presence. And of course, here also you find hundreds and hundreds of the traditional Chinese shophouses, which we first saw in Rangoon, and which we'll see not only in Singapore, but everywhere in Southeast Asia the Chinese have been. So, in 1824, Penang, Malacca, and Singapore were jointly administered by the British as the Straits Settlements. And Penang was initially the capital, but the capital city was then moved down to Singapore in 1932 permanently. And this is because of Singapore's far better strategic location, truly sort of midway between China and India, and also for its deep natural harbor. I feel like I'm quoting a history textbook from school now. We know this book, of course. Singapore was founded in 1819 by Sir Thomas Stamford Raffles. We've met him twice already in Tales of Asia. First in Malacca, where he was responsible for stopping the British troops from blowing up Malacca's fort and saving Afamasa Gate as it stands today. And we also met him in Java because he was the Governor General of Java, residing in Batavia during the brief period when the British ruled Java. And you can see here that this portrait was probably taken. It was just when he was like fresh out of Java at the time. And so because his stint in Java didn't last long, he was very eager to leave a legacy in Southeast Asia. And he did so by establishing what was the greatest sort of trading emporium in the Far East at the time, in what had been a small fishing settlement. The key to Singapore's success was free trade, and which Raffles had decided at the very beginning was to be the core of Singapore's trading philosophy. And what free trade means, just like is that any ship from any nation could come and sort of trade and sell their wares in this port without paying any tax or tariff. And this was important because before free trade, the British came along with free trade, the Dutch and the Portuguese functioned on the basis of a monopoly. So they controlled the trading route, the global trading route in spices from the East Indies back to Europe and beyond. And so free trade meant, free trade was competitive advantage because it meant that merchants, it would be cheaper for the merchants to bring their ships to Singapore instead of anywhere else in the region. And it worked. So all the world's ships docked here. The European ones, those from China, jumps from China, the prahus from Bugis and the Malay archipelago, they all came here, and it made the city wealthy pretty quick, and also a melting pot of peoples from all over the world. And so Raffles got a bit jittery about this, and to cope with the sort of general, influx of these various immigrant communities, because he couldn't stand the messiness of the city, he commissioned in 1822 an urban plan for the city, and this is known as the Jackson Plan, after Lieutenant Philip Jackson, which was Singapore's earliest urban planner. And this plan sits in the National Museum of Singapore, of course. And it's extremely significant because the city center in today's Singapore is more or less still configured according to the Jackson Plan in 1822. So let's see what its components were. The river divided the city in two. And the northern side is the White Town. We call it the Civic District, very sort of politically correct way to call it. Well, this is Orient, north is actually this way. So to the east is the commercial district on the waterfront, just above it is the immigrant district. Again, this refers to primarily the Chinese and the Indian quarters. North of the civic district was the European town, the sort of residential suburb at the time. And then further north were the Malay kampungs. Now kampungs, today you think that it means villages, but it actually means sort of towns. So in this area there were the Bugis kampung, the Arab kampungs, as well as the royal quarter, the Sultan of Johore's palace and mosque stood here. So, this is a map. Sorry. This is a map from 1917, about 100 years later. And you see that the town plan still works out. So, the river divides the city into two. Civic district. Below it, commercial district and immigrant districts. And remember also, we sort of saw this configuration in Georgetown and Penang. And at the intersection with the government offices and the Victoria Memorial, which was once again built in the early 1900s to commemorate Queen Victoria's passing. Like Penang also, there was a padang, which is called the Esplanade, like I mentioned, in the British colonial era. And it's surrounded by civic monuments. There's also a fort here, but it's no longer the same kind of fort as in Penang. In fact, it wasn't a fort at all. It was Government Hill. It was only later on renamed Fort Canning. Penang's sort of waterfront is replicated here on a larger scale as the Singapore waterfront, the Singapore bund, so to speak. And it's a beach street. It's sort of replicated here as Raffles Place. There is also a beach road in Singapore, but unlike in Penang, a beach road takes you to the European town, as well as to the Malay quarter of the city. Okay, so let's go forward in time. So this is Singapore in 2015, Google Maps. You can see also that more or less the configuration remains the same. This is the coastline as it used to be. So not much difference than before, except of course the land has expanded. The access still stands. We have the civic district, the financial district, Chinatown, Empress Place, the Padang and Esplanade, Fort Canning, the waterfront, the Fullerton waterfront, Boat Quay Raffles Place is still there, Beach Road still there, except it's no longer on the beach. The European town is today's Bras Basah and Bugis, and the Malay quarter is Kampung Glam. But let's now pay a visit to the commercial district port. Here's how the tour of this area will go. First, we will pay a visit to the Singapore waterfront, which is set along Collier Quay, and we'll take a look at historic Johnston's Pier, which doesn't exist anymore, and the General Post Office, which does. We'll walk in to take a look at Boat Quay and Battery Road, as they used to look, and heading down south to Raffles Place before ending off at the Telok Air Market. So here's a view of Collier Quay in the early 1900s, looking towards Johnston Pier here. Well, this is a postcard from the 1920s. And you can see it looked like a European city. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of the entire waterfront, but there is an exhibition with the entire Singapore bund laid out here just in front of the National Museum. And it's done from my friend Andrew, who's here. Oh, that's Andrew. Yeah, so he did it, and I suggest you check it out because it's a recreation of this view that you would have had when you came into Singapore that does not exist anymore. Most of these buildings have completely disappeared and been replaced by higher rises. So this is Johnston's Pier in the early 1900s. It was the main pier you would have arrived at. It was demolished in the 1930s and replaced with this. Clifford Pier, which is part of today's Fullerton Heritage Group of hotels. Just north of Johnston's Pier was one of the most iconic buildings on the Singapore waterfront. It was HSBC headquarters. This sort of it spoke empire, you know. And this was the first thing I think you would have seen when you came into the city. Here's another view of it. You see it stood right here beside where the General Post Office is. And this is sort of an iconic sight line at the time to Victoria Memorial Hall. So this is in the 1900s. This is the exact same spot today. Of course, the GPO still stands. HSBC still stands where it used to stand. It's now a high-rise building. I can't even take that photograph. Victoria Memorial Hall is now obscure. Let's walk through here to take a look. This is Maybank. Just behind Maybank, with one of the few buildings that remain today, the Bank of China building. This was built in Art Deco style in the 1930s, and it still stands, somewhat dwarfed today, the Bank of China. And then we get onto Battery Road. This was how Battery Road used to look like. It looked like just right out of London in the 1900s. This is another view of it, with some horse carriages and so on. Unfortunately, all of this is gone today, and Battery Road is so nondescript you won't even remember where it is or what stands on it. So there's no point of showing it, really. And just past Battery Road, of course, Boat Quay. This is actually the sort of immigrant side of Boat Quay. The European side of Boat Quay is the North Bank. And you will see here that this used to play host to hundreds and hundreds of these boat people who lived and traded their wares on the boats. The descendants of these boat people are in Penang today. They're the clan jetties, the communities that live in the clan jetties. And the clan jetties, the communities of the clan jetties used to be part of these boat people that colonized the ports, cities, everywhere in Southeast Asia. You would find these, there were the Tanka people in Hong Kong. You'd find these in Phnom Penh, in Singapore, in Batavia, wherever there were Chinese communities in the port cities. And of course, the Chinese style go-downs, where they brought their goods, they brought the boats disgorged their goods at the coolies. But this is what it looks like today. Of course, the go-downs still stand, but the rest of it has changed. Moving through here, we go into Raffles Place. This is Raffles Place in the early 1900s. And it was the heart of the commercial district, with banks and the headquarters of the trading companies, and also two of the colony's largest departmental stores. Yeah, one of them is Robinson's and Company. It still exists today at the Huron. That's where its headquarters is now. This is its building here, Robinson & Co. And it occupied a building known as the Raffles Chambers, which was iconic because of its statue of Eros on the roof. Unfortunately, the building burned down in 1972 and had to be demolished. The other major departmental store is John Little and Company, the Harrods of the East. Of course, John Little also exists today. And they occupy this sort of very Moorish building at the other end of Raffles Place, right here, just beside the Chartered Bank of India, China, and Australia. Right, and this is a wonderfully over-the-top building with its dome, neoclassical, built in the 1890s. Unfortunately, this is also sort of demolished in the 1980s, so this is the actual view today. This is Standard Chartered. It stands where the old bank used to stand. John Little, of course, was also demolished. But the architecture of John Little is sort of referenced in the entry to the Raffles Place station today. From here, we take a brief stop at the Tulakai Market, which is known as La Passat. It was built in 1894 in kind of Edwardian style, and it's interesting because of its sort of octagonal structure, which you can see up above. You can't quite see it. From here, we cross the river into the civic district to visit its key monuments. And if you recall Penang, We start off here at the Government Offices of Victoria Memorial. There is also an esplanade or padang, and then there was the statue of Raffles, which stood in the middle of the padang. Flanking the padang were the municipal offices and the Supreme Court. There's a cricket club and recreation club, just like in Penang. The Anglican Church, Raffles Institution, Fort Canning, the Raffles Library and Museum, and then in the European town you find the various sort of European communities, the Catholic community, Armenian, Jewish, and we will end off at the Raffles Hotel. So here's a panorama again from the heart of the town. You can see this is from the 1900s, the government offices, Victoria Memorial, Dapuzi Obelisk, municipal offices, City Hall, Supreme Court, Cricket Club, and St. Andrew's Cathedral, Fort Canning, and the recent works at the Victoria Theatre Memorial Hall are sort of an effort to try to return the space, to how it used to look like in the early 1900s. Victoria Memorial Hall were actually two buildings. There was a town hall, which was built in 1855, and then the Memorial Hall to Queen Victoria, and they were then joined by a clock tower in 1905. Beside them were government offices, which are today's Asian Civilizations Museum. It dates from 1867. They were the Secretariat building of Singapore. And nearby was the esplanade of the padang, also known as Raffles Place at the time. And from this oil painting from the 1850s, you see that it was sort of a civic, sporting grounds. This was a very, this was a sort of, this artist painted an aspirational view. It was a view of the city as a modern colony with all these splendid edifices. Everything is so clean and well laid out. And this is in 1850. And this again is a similar view, of the modern city with everything sort of spanking new and laid out towards the water. Two majestic buildings flank the land side of the padang. In the 1900s, the first of them was the Hotel de l'Europe, which was the city's grand hotel. It was built in the 1900s, but it went out of business, and it was then replaced in the 1930s with this Supreme Court in a sort of grand neoclassical style that really spoke of the might of the British Empire, of trade, of commerce. And right beside it are the municipal offices or City Hall, built in 1929, also in the neoclassical style. And the neoclassical style was sort of the style of the British Empire. In front of the Supreme Court was the Cricket Club, built in 1884, and here it is still today. The same building still stands, so the concept has changed. St. Andrew's Cathedral, built in a neo-Gothic style. At the time, the Raffles statue stood here on the padang, but it was moved in 1919 to before Victoria Memorial Hall. 1919 was the centenary of the founding of modern Singapore, and the statue still stands there today, as does St. Andrew's Cathedral. Diagonally across from it was this building. I don't know how many people remember this. This was the Raffles Institution, the campus of Raffles Institution, RI. It was established by Raffles himself in 1823, and it was and still is one of the most prestigious high schools in Singapore. Unfortunately, in the early 1980s, they were replaced with this, Raffles City. Yeah. And Raffles City is still named in reference to Raffles Institution, and there is a sort of a small, not on this side of the building, but there is a small marker that tells you the history of the site. Okay, from Raffles City, we take a quick jaunt up Fort Canning Hill past the former Christian Cemetery and the military barracks, which is today Art Gallery, to the Raffles Museum and Library, which was established here in 1887. In a neo-Palladian style, and this is of course today's National Museum of Singapore. And from here on, we are at the European town, known today as Bras Basah. Here's where we find the Catholic community, as there are many institutions, like St. Joseph's Institution, built in 1867. today's Singapore Art Museum, the Convent of the Holy Infant Jesus, built in 1903, which is something else altogether now. You know. The Armenian community is also here, and they worshipped at the Armenian Apostolic Church of St. Gregory the Illuminator. It's the oldest church in Singapore, built in 1835, and built by one of our most famous architects at the time, George Drumgood Coleman. Still stands today, though dwarfed by the buildings around it. Here also you found the Jewish community, and who worshipped at the Mahai Avoth Synagogue, which is the oldest synagogue in Southeast Asia, built in 1878. In the area, at the time, you also found many of these photo studios, and so here's some of the, some photos that show you how at least Europeans have used to dress, and how this dress sense changed over the decades. These were in the Victorian era. You can see it was still a lot more conservative and formal. Formal dresses at the various balls that took place in the city. By the turn of the 19th century, the dress became a little more casual, sort of variation of the safari dress. And then in the 1920s and 30s, people just got more sensible and started dressing in white because that was cooler. And the center of the social scene in Singapore were, of course, the clubs, like the cricket club, there was the jockey club, yacht club, and so on. Here are some ladies, possibly at the jockey club. Again, you see that dress sense has become even less conservative and more in tune with the weather. The other centers of the social scene were the grand hotels in the city. There was Goodwood Park Hotel, which before 1917 was the Teutonia Club, the club where the German-speaking community in Singapore came together. The other grand hotel in the city was the Adelphi Hotel. Some of you might remember this. Unfortunately, it's been replaced by a mall, the Adelphi Mall. Most people don't even know this used to stand there anymore. But of course, the grandest of all the hotels was the Raffles Hotel in Singapore, the grandest hotel in the Far East. It was built in 1887, 2 years after its older sibling in Penang, the E&O. Again, it was, in its time saw royalty and celebrities and writers and so on. Up until the 1970s, I think the hotel was a toast of town. You had these cruise ships that came by, and all the tourists would come here. And any hour of the day, the place would be bursting with activity. There'd be dances in the ballroom, a feast in the dining room. But these days, it's a lot more quiet. There's a lot more of a restrained and rarefied air to the building, which I don't really like. I don't know if I can say this on video, but it is not quite in keeping with the time, but it remains absolutely beautiful building. And the best place, again, for a nostalgic trip back to Singapore. And so today's Raffles is actually a product of a restoration that returned the hotel to a benchmark year of 1915. And this act of restoration is actually very important because it spurred a series of other restorations of grand hotels in the region, like the Raffles Hotel Royal in Phnom Penh, and a few other hotels in the region, saving many of these grand old dames from demolition. So, coming out from Raffles Hotel, we sort of just dive into immigrant districts. I know I'm running out of time, so I won't go through in detail. But the point that I'm making really is that you see cities of Rangoon, Penang, and Singapore, these British colonial cities, the general sense of urban planning was the same. Always an immigrant district where the Chinese and the Indian communities were housed. In Singapore, at least, there were two key streets. So these streets are sort of equivalents of Penang Street of Harmony, no doubt why. Telok Street, because it has a Chinese temple, mosque, church, and these shop houses. South Ridge Road is an iconic view from the 1900s because of its, also a street of harmony because of Surya Marian Hindu temple, the Masjid Jamia Mosque, a mosque for Indian Muslims. And more recently, as if to prove the point, the Chinese Buddha Tooth Relic Temple. Again, making it some sort of a true street of bargaining with sort of Chinese and Indian placed in the version on the same street. Further up north, I mentioned, since I have the Chinese and the Indians here, I have to do the CIM thing, and also go to Kampong Glam to at least flash the Sultan Mosque, which was the royal mosque of the Sultan of Johor. It was built in 1928, and near it is the Sultan's Palace, built in 1843. And this is where the Sultan of Johor and his family stayed up until the 1990s, when it became a bit of I don't know if I can say this, but it's politically correct, but it became too many people were living in it, and eventually the government bought over the land. It is today the Malay Heritage Center. I have a quick video to show, about 3 minutes, just of the city then, and then we'll sort of end it off. So let's see if it works.
All parts of the city are served and connected by well-paved roads, convenient arteries for those who live in the suburbs or in the beautiful residential section of Penang. The governor's mansion stands upon a hill commanding an unobstructed view of the entire city.
This is Istana today.
Unpretentious, yet spacious and comfortable, are many of the homes built in an older architectural style, with great open arcaded verandas serving as living rooms in this tropical city. Life in this thriving town colony is always full and varied, with garden parties, dinners, races, sports meets, and dozens of other activities. A gathering place is Raffles Hotel, one of the most renowned hostelries in the East. At tiffin time, the midday meal hour, the veranda of this well-known rendezvous is always crowded, with those who come to enjoy moving drinks, fine music, and pleasant companionship.
All right. I'm almost done. The last two places we'll go visit for today's tour is a little further out of the city, two verdant areas, Orchard Road and Botanical Gardens. First, Orchard Road, like its name suggests, in the 1800s, Orchard Road was a landscape of orchards and cemeteries. It was sort of a leafy, green area. This is it in the 1900s, when it started to first become, when it started to develop into a shopping area. When it first started to develop into a shopping area, so 1900s, 1930s, and of course this is it today. But strangely enough, I mean I feel at least, going down Orchard Road today, The streets are lined with these trees that make you feel like you are still in the orchard as before. And you look down, you really just see the trees, you don't see the skyscrapers. This is all, I feel anyway, a very nostalgic throwback to what Orchard Road used to be. Just north of Orchard Road, of course, is the Botanical Gardens, which was established in 1859. It was a commercial garden, and it's associated with the development of the rubber industry in Korea. So this is the view of the garden in the early 1900s. Very pleasing and restful. It was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site just in July this year, and today it's largely unchanged, I think, as you can see, except this is Palm Valley, and this year in Palm Valley, which is sort of my favorite part of the park, is where we end today's tour. To me, it feels like sitting here in this park, you get a sense of old world Singapore most strongly. And so I sort of leave us all here to contemplate this view of old Singapore and the man that was responsible for it all. I want to just point out a few books that I'm required to recommend that I found in the library here. Those in red, I think, are absolutely essential to give a sense of how colonial society was like in those cities, Burmese days. This is really funny. George Bennet's book, Penang. J.G. Farrell, Singapore Grip, set in Singapore during the war. And it's again remarkably funny, late colonial era life and Construction News Singapore Victorial history. I would like to thank you all for bearing with me. If you're, the talks are linked to my book, The Romance of the Grand Tour, 100 Years of Travel in Southeast Asia. They feature 12 historic port cities in Southeast Asia, both archival and contemporary views, and they're available in all the bookstores in Singapore, in Southeast Asia, in Hong Kong, and in London. Unfortunately, my publisher usually travels with me to sell the books at a major discount, but for just today, they're not here. So do please check it out in Kinokuniya down the street. Otherwise, I video all of these talks. If you missed the first 4 talks, do check them out at this website or on my Facebook page. And if you have any questions, do please email me. I want to thank you everybody again for being so patient as I wrap it up.